the primitive forms of artificial intelligence we already have proved very useful.
AI is a golden opportunity.
How do we ensure that this technology is regulated?
The long arc of technological history is now in an extraordinary new phase.
The AI6 Podcast with Joanne Sweeney.
Ashley McDonald, you are so welcome to the AI6 Podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, listen, first of all, please introduce yourself to our viewers and to our podcast listeners.
Yeah, so I'm based south of Nashville, Tennessee. I don't know if you could tell it with my accent. I don't feel like I have one, but everybody else says that I do. I was most recently the Director of Marketing and Communications for an AI platform for law enforcement. And I am in the process of transitioning to a new opportunity. And I also teach for the University of Tennessee. I'm a teaching associate for their public information programs, so PIO Essentials and Master PIO. And I sit on the Commission on Professional Credentialing for the Center of Public Safety Excellence. And lastly, I'm a public information officer myself for the Emergency Management Association of Tennessee.
What a rounded profile. So you bring lots of insight to today's conversation. And like me, we're both communications professionals, essentially with that niche, law enforcement and government and public sector. Before we go into your work, what about you personally, professionally? How have you been adapting to this new age of AI?
Yeah, at first, I have to admit, I was very hesitant. I was kind of against it because, I'm a PR major. That's what I graduated with my degree in. And writing has always been something that I've enjoyed doing. Creativity is something that I feel like, I'm blessed with. And so it was like, I don't need that. I'll never use that. That sort of attitude is how I started. I had a commission member tell me that he wrote I hope this doesn't read him out, but wrote his wife a poem for Valentine's Day through AI. And I was like, oh, that's horrible. He said he was just playing around with it. So then I started playing around with it a little bit. I have a son. He's now 8 years old, but a couple of years ago, I started playing around with it and just making up little silly songs for him. That was my first introduction to it. So as I became more comfortable with it and did some training on prompting and different things, I started using it for a wide range of things like, brainstorming and maybe like, okay, this social media post is pretty stagnant. How can I spice it up a little bit? Things like that. Or I have this massive presentation that I'm preparing for. I don't even know where to start. Help me to build a good outline, and then I can use, my instincts and my experience and my education to then fill in those blanks, right? So never viewed it as, anything that I was scared of replacing me. I thought it, eventually I came to know that it enhanced what I was already doing.
It's so true. AI plus you is better, right? That's the promise. And given your work in law enforcement, how do you think the sector is embracing AI or not?
I think a generalization would be to say that law enforcement is kind of slow to adopt it. They're a little bit more hesitant. Understand because of the sensitivity of the things that they do, the information that they have. It seems to me, at least it's been my experience, that it's the younger generation of police officers who are fully embracing it. Yeah, go ahead, write my report for me as long as I can sign off that, AI helped me generate it. That's great. It's saving me a lot of time. But I think because of the unknown or the fear of the unknown, there are some seasoned officers that are a little bit slower to adopt if they want to adopt it at all.
And your work with the company that had the AI tool for law enforcement, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it started out as 100% body-worn camera review. So that was kind of how they came into the space. And then it morphed into AI-assisted report writing and policy search. And then they started in the agentic AI space, and so in the conversational AI. And so it could do role playing with detectives. It could summarize large cold cases with different types of media and different things like that. They're dabbling in some other things now, which are pretty incredible. So if anybody's interested in that, they can certainly email me maybe afterward, and I can tell them the name of the company. I hate to just say it out loud, but they're doing some amazing things with it. And to see how it progressed just in the short time that I was there just over a year, and they made amazing strides in how they were using AI and how departments were implementing that into their departments.
You see, when agencies see the solutions at work, it's very hard to resist the power of AI. And I always say that the efficiency that you get will give it back to the agency, who can then give it back to the member of the public. Would you agree with that statement?
I do agree with that. And I was in a unique position where I was helping to craft case studies. So I got to talk to some of the users, and I actually talked to a chief of one department, and it kind of tickled me a little bit, because he said, I'm actually trying to figure out what it won't do, because he had used it for a case that was still open. It uncovered, a very minute detail that happened to be just on a handwritten note from, a few years ago. And then that reignited, like maybe we should, or gave them a tip, maybe we should go, follow this lead. And then he said, he used it to analyze a case that had already been solved, just to kind of check, like, did it come up with the same, conclusion that we did? And there were some other things that he tested out, but just for him to say, I'm trying to figure out what it won't do, that really made a big impact to me.
And as a communications pro, what are your own kind of favorite use cases from using AI? And do you have any favorite tools?
So I'm a Chat GPT pro girl right now. I mean, I've dabbled in Mid-Journey. I've used it, in native platforms like Canva, Meta. I don't like using it in Canva. I don't think it's quite there yet. I'm not a huge fan of Copilot, but I think part of that is because I started out with ChatGPT Pro. And so I think it's what you're most comfortable with, right? But I'm constantly learning and seeing what other tools are out there that could be helpful to me. Particularly what I use it for is kind of what I alluded to earlier, is that brainstorming piece, or sparking, not replacing, but sparking creativity. You can only say, especially if you're in public safety, you can only say the same thing, and make it creative, make it, sound exciting, so many times. And so you get brain drain, you honestly do. And we get kind of stuck in this stagnant spot too, and we're not really changing with the times. We say what we've always said. So I love that it can be used for that. I don't want it to replace anything that I'm doing. I don't want it to seem less authentic. I want it, again, to just be an extension of what I'm already doing.
And you're also involved in education and teaching, like myself. Now, that's also a very tricky sector, because when you're educating people, you want them to know that they've gained the knowledge, they own the knowledge, they can apply that knowledge in the real world. But now we have AI tools that are essentially amazing knowledge brokers, and knowledge is ubiquitous because it's at the touch of a button. How do you think that sector is really going to embrace the challenge that AI possesses, or that gives it?
So being a teaching associate for the University of Tennessee, I only teach their PIO Essentials programs and Master PIO programs. We educate on how it can be a useful tool, what you need to be afraid of versus, what you don't need to be afraid of, basically. As the University of Tennessee as a whole, I can't speak to maybe how they're embracing it, or how they're trying to at least brace themselves. Like, people are probably going to be using this either to replace some of what they're learning here, or to submit assignments and things like that. I can say that on behalf of, like, the Center for Public Safety Excellence, and then just in talking to some colleagues that are instructors, the issue has become, okay, how much of this was written by AI and how much is authentic to the person who's submitting it? And so that, I think, is like the biggest challenge for universities, for technical programs and things like that, is sorting through what is truly from that person. What is that person's perspective? What is that person's level of talent versus how much of this was AI? I think that's the biggest challenge for those institutions right now.
And that brings me to the question on trust, because I always say trust is the currency in the digital age, and by God, it's the currency in the AI age. And so promoting open conversations around AI as opposed to calling people out, I think is an important approach. How willing do you think people generally in the professions that you're engaged in are, willing to embrace AI fully and completely? Like you talked about agentic AI, conversational AI. Its power is remarkable.
Yeah, so one of the things that we teach, or I teach in the AI module, we kind of go over some current statistics. And Muckrack put out a study, I think it's called The State of PR in 2025. But 3 out of 4 PR professionals are now using AI or admit to using it, right? And that's 3 times what it was in 2023, which I thought was a huge deal. And so when I started kind of diving deeper into the statistics to see, what types of things they were using it for, 93% of it said it sped up their work, which was great. We all know that as a PR professional, marketing professional, we wear very many hats and we have very little time to get things accomplished because things are moving so fast. And then 78% reported that it improved the quality. And I know from the law enforcement space, particularly with the report writing, that's what they were mostly concerned with was, their law enforcement, they just want to fight crime. They just want to do good in the community. They don't want to sit behind a desk. They don't want to be doing paperwork. And it's not necessarily their strong suit. They wanted to make a difference in the world, but they didn't want to do that by writing reports, right? So they're not always the greatest report writers or consistent report writers, we'll put it that way. And so, having that availability to use AI to enhance their reporting and to make them more professional, more consistent every time was a huge benefit to them.
And you're dead right. We want our police officers on the beat and not behind a computer. So the rewards are many. What about the misconceptions that you hear around AI that people believe that potentially aren't true?
So in the law enforcement space, I would say that the biggest misconception among like the senior leadership is that their people aren't already using it.
Mhm.
A lot of them would say, we're not bringing that into the department. It's like your cops probably have Chat GPT on their phone, quite honestly. Like if you're not aware of that and you don't have, you don't start from there, then you're doing yourself a complete disservice. Not embracing it as a leader and knowing that it's already existing in your department, whether you're, promoting it or not. You really need to have the knowledge that it's happening. That's not a great way to handle it. So what are the options out there that are unique to law enforcement that, further protect our information, that have special safeguards for this space, those sorts of things. So I think in the law enforcement space, that's the biggest misconception. Oh, we're not using it in our department. We banned it. Well, you can ban it, but it doesn't mean they're not using it. I think the other misconception is that it's going to, replace employees. I think there's a lot of fear, especially PR and marketing professionals, that they can be replaced by AI. We see there are a lot of large corporations that are emptying some of their departments, complete departments. But personally, I feel like this PR and marketing space, particularly in public safety, local government, those sorts of spaces, you can never remove the human element. There's too much involved in that community engagement and things. There's many aspects to the position that AI cannot complete.
You're absolutely right. Our job is a human one, right? It's about the relationship, about understanding how somebody's feeling, even if they're not saying anything, understanding culture, context. And again, it frees us up to do more of that strategic and client customer facing work. So what about AI policy? That sets the guardrails and the rules for AI use. What are some of the things you think are essential in an AI policy for an organization?
Yeah, and that was I wrote this down from that study too, that 55% of PR pros lack usage guidelines and policies. So that is a disparaging percentage there, obviously. I think they really have to look at it from what usage will we allow versus what we won't allow. What can it be used for? How it can be used in the workplace, what types of platforms, are you going to use, multi-factor authentication, all these different things. It needs to be a combination of legal and IT and senior leadership working on, building these guidelines and policies. The most important thing to me, I would say, is having a policy. You can build on it as you go and as you see, because we always know that every rule that a department has is probably attached to somebody who did something that caused them to have to create that rule. So it can be a fluid document. You start the policy, you work with your legal team, you work with your IT team, and then you just build upon it as you go along and as things in the AI space progress and as tools, get bigger and better and more advanced.
So what are you optimistic about going into 2026 and knowing that AI is so much more advanced and it's going to continue to accelerate?
Yeah, I'm excited in the vein of when I started out in the public information space for a fire department, I was the solo PIO. I was also the solo PIO for an entire county, serving several different departments, including the mayor's office. And that was back during COVID and civil unrest and the wonderful time of 2020 and 2021. I felt like I was beating myself coming and going. I was burning the candle at both ends. I had such burnout because it was just me. All the responsibility fell on me. But now knowing in 2026, this day and age, we can automate repetitive tasks. We can, again, we can utilize AI to start a framework that we can build upon, and we don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel. We can use it to check our work. I don't know if you feel like I do about this, but I'm a perfectionist when it comes to typos. I will say to this person, you read it, you read it, you read it, I'll read it again. But being able to just send that and not having to bother anybody else and just having, the grammar checked and the typos, just make sure I don't have any redundant terms in there, those sorts of things. I love that. And I love not having to bother other people for those types of simple tasks. I love having basically a virtual assistant.
And, that's a really important point, and maybe something that's not spoken about enough is how AI can really eradicate the potential for burnout. And when you're working in a fast moving news, current affairs, law enforcement environment, you can't stop. You are on the clock based on what's happening in the real world. So I think there's the work-life balance. I just said to somebody yesterday, the promise of a 4-day week should be the reward that we get, and we should get the same pay for working 5 days. And I think that would be a real gift to society if we could not just have productivity go to the bottom line, but if we could give back some of that time to citizens, patients, customers, but us as workers and as humans. Am I being a bit far-fetched with that sort of idea?
No, it's so funny because I actually just had a conversation with, she's a life coach, but she was doing some research. And we had this discussion. She said she liked to call it life-work balance because life should be the priority over work, family, faith, those sorts of things. And I totally agree with her. And as we were talking in our short conversation, I was like, you as a life coach, and I said, this would take some time to build out, and maybe AI can be used for that. And maybe somebody will use this idea now. But, if you're looking, I have several friends that are looking for new job opportunities and those sorts of things. I tend to think from the lens of if I knew then what I know now. But if there were a way to bucket employers, corporations, companies, those sorts of things who meet a number of check boxes that say this company values life-work balance, I think they would see a ton of people apply for their positions. Good working, hardworking, productive people applying for those positions, because this is what's feeding burnout is, somebody that does an incredible job, but also wants to spend time with their family. They just get completely pulled in both directions. I've been there. I've been there in different spaces that I've been in over the years, and it's not fun. So if somebody were to come up with something like that, like a checkbox list for employers, okay, they're on this list that says they value life-work balance, I'm going to that list to look. If I'm looking for a job, I'm going to that list first. And it's not to say that you're going to do, you want to do less work. It's not about that at all. You're doing the same amount of work, but that company values your family as well and knows you have a life outside of that work.
Yeah, because, and again, often women carry the load with the home responsibilities. We're working at work, but we're working at home, and I don't think we'll delegate our mothering or parenting to an AI assistant anytime soon.
No.
I think they can't replace that, but I think AI for good as a broader concept can really be a force for change in this world. And thank you so much, Ashley, for joining me on the AI6 podcast. Where can we direct people if they want to connect with you and your work?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. My profile is under Ashley Corley McDonald. That's Corley. You can email me. I don't know if you have an ability to put that in the chat somewhere or put it in the post. I'm totally fine with that. I love to have conversations like this with people. I'm actually having another conversation with somebody in the AI space this afternoon. I love it. I think we fear something that we don't know less if we educate ourselves on it more. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation. I've really enjoyed this one and meeting you and being able to spend time with you, and looking forward to hearing from some of your listeners.
Fantastic. Well, all the way from Nashville to Galway in the west of Ireland, Ashley McDonald, thank you so much and continued success, my friend.
Thank you. Same to you.